Karoline Leavitt sat quietly in her seat, gazing out the window as the plane cruised at 35,000 feet. She had been traveling frequently for work, but this flight was supposed to be just another routine trip. Little did she know, an unexpected confrontation was about to unfold. As the flight attendant made her way down the aisle, she stopped abruptly next to Karoline. Her eyes locked onto the small cross pendant resting just above Karoline's neckline. At first, there was just a moment of silence, but then, with a sharp tone, the flight attendant spoke. "Excuse me, ma'am. We ask that passengers refrain from wearing religious symbols that could make others uncomfortable," she said, her voice laced with irritation. Karoline furrowed her brows, caught off guard by the remark. "I'm sorry." "What?" she asked, adjusting in her seat. The flight attendant crossed her arms. "Your cross. Some passengers might find it offensive. We strive to create an inclusive environment on board, so I'll have to ask you to put it away." A few passengers nearby turned their heads, sensing the tension. Karoline was not one to back down easily, especially when it came to her faith. "I'm sorry, but I'm not removing my cross," she responded calmly but firmly. "It's a personal symbol of my beliefs, and I have every right to wear it." "Chaturi," flight attendant scoffed. "We have policies against offensive displays." Karoline raised an eyebrow. "So if I were wearing another religious symbol, would you ask me to remove it?" The flight attendant hesitated for a second before replying, "That's not the point." "Actually, that's exactly the point," Karoline countered. "Freedom of religion is a protected right, and you singling me out because I wear a cross is discrimination." "The eye." Flight attendant's face flushed as murmurs spread among the passengers. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others exchanged whispers. A man sitting across the aisle leaned in. "She's right," he said. "You can't just tell someone to hide their faith." Another woman chimed in. "I wear a Star of David necklace, and I've never been asked to take it off. This is ridiculous." Realizing the growing support for Karoline, the flight attendant's confidence wavered. She stammered, trying to find a response, but before she could speak, another voice interrupted. "Excuse me, what seems to be the issue here?" A second flight attendant had approached, clearly sensing the escalating situation. "This passenger refuses to comply with our policies on religious neutrality," the first flight attendant explained, though her voice now lacked its previous authority. The second flight attendant gave her a puzzled look. "We don't have a policy like that." Silence. The first flight attendant blinked in shock, as if the ground had just shifted beneath her. "In fact," the second attendant continued, "our airline welcomes people of all faiths, and passengers are free to wear religious symbols." The tension in the air shifted instantly. A few passengers clapped quietly, while others nodded in approval. The first flight attendant, now visibly flustered, muttered, "I was just trying to ensure inclusivity." Purewise, second attendant gave a polite but firm nod. "Inclusivity means respecting everyone, including their faith." She then turned to Karoline with an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding, ma'am. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable." Karoline smiled. "I appreciate that. Thank you." With that, the first flight attendant hurried away, her confidence shattered. As she disappeared to the back of the plane, whispers of disapproval followed her. It was a moment she wouldn't forget, one where an attempt to suppress someone's faith had backfired spectacularly. As for Karoline, she sat back in her seat, gripping her cross gently between her fingers. This was more than just an interaction. It was a reminder that standing firm in one's beliefs can make all the difference. And in that moment, she knew. The flight may have been turbulent, but the truth had prevailed. Karoline took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had just happened. It wasn't about causing a scene, it was about standing up for something that mattered. She glanced around at the other passengers, many of whom were now giving her nods of support. One elderly woman a few rows ahead turned around and smiled. Good for you, dear, she said softly. Don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't believe in. A man seated across the aisle leaned in. I can't believe she tried to pull that. If it had been any other symbol, I bet she wouldn't have said a word. Karoline nodded, knowing he was right. There was an unsettling double standard at play, one that so many people were tired of seeing. Meanwhile, the first flight attendant had disappeared to the back of the plane, clearly embarrassed by how the situation had unfolded. But the murmurs among the passengers didn't stop. A young woman a few seats down was already typing furiously on her phone. This is definitely going on social media, she muttered. Within minutes, Karoline's story was spreading. A few passengers who had witnessed the interaction posted about it online, and the reactions were swift. People were outraged that someone would be told to hide their faith in such a blatant act of discrimination. A few moments later, the flight's captain emerged from the cockpit. His expression was calm but serious as he approached Karoline's row. I just heard about what happened, he said, and I want to personally apologize. That is not how we do things on this airline. Karoline appreciated the gesture. I just don't understand why she felt the need to single me out, she said. I wasn't bothering anyone. The captain sighed. Unfortunately, some people think they're enforcing inclusivity by excluding certain beliefs. But that's not what we stand for. We respect all passengers and you have every right to wear your cross. By this point, the flight attendant who had caused the entire issue was called to the front of the plane. Her face was pale as she approached the captain, clearly realizing that she had made a huge mistake. Do you have anything to say? The captain asked her firmly. She swallowed hard and turned toward Karoline. I apologize, she muttered, though it was clear she wasn't used to admitting fault. Karoline didn't gloat or make a scene. Instead, she simply nodded. I hope this is a lesson that people's faith isn't something to be hidden, she said. It's part of who they are. The flight attendant gave a stiff nod before quickly walking away, no doubt wishing she could disappear. As the flight continued, Karoline felt a quiet sense of victory, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told to suppress their beliefs. The world needed more people willing to stand firm, and today she had done just that. By the time the plane landed, Karoline checked her phone and saw that her story had already gained traction. Messages of support flooded in, with people from all over the country expressing their outrage over what had happened. Some even vowed to take their business elsewhere, refusing to support an airline that allowed such discrimination. Later, as she walked through the terminal, a few fellow passengers stopped to thank her. You spoke up for all of us today, one man said. We need more people like you. Karoline smiled, knowing that this moment was bigger than just one flight. It was a stand for faith, freedom, and the right to be who you are without fear. As Karoline walked through the airport terminal, she reflected on the power of standing firm in her beliefs. She wasn't looking for a fight, nor did she want to create controversy, but when she was challenged, she knew she couldn't back down. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a flood of notifications. Social media was already ablaze with discussions about what had happened. Some news outlets had even picked up the story, and it was gaining traction fast. She clicked on a post from a well-known conservative commentator. A flight attendant tries to force a passenger to hide her faith. The passenger stands her ground. This is what courage looks like. We need more of it. Thousands of likes and shares. The conversation was spreading like wildfire. People were chiming in with their own experiences of religious discrimination, many expressing frustration at the double standard when it came to public displays of faith. As she made her way through the baggage claim area, she noticed a man approaching her. He looked familiar, probably one of the passengers from her flight. Hey, he said, offering a friendly nod. I just wanted to say thank you for standing up for yourself back there. A lot of us wanted to say something, but you actually did it. Karoline smiled. I appreciate that. It just didn't sit right with me to let something like that slide. He shook his head. It shouldn't have happened in the first place, but at least now people are talking about it. As they spoke, another passenger, a middle-aged woman with a cross necklace of her own, walked up to Karoline. "I just saw what happened on Twitter," she said. "You have no idea how much this means to people like me. Thank you." Karoline felt a wave of gratitude. It was one thing to stand up for herself, but knowing it resonated with others made it all the more meaningful. Over the next few days, the incident continued to spread. Major news outlets covered the story, sparking heated debates about religious freedom, corporate policies, and the increasing pressure to suppress certain beliefs in the name of inclusivity. Even the airline had to respond. They released a public statement, distancing themselves from the flight attendants' actions and reaffirming their commitment to religious freedom. But the damage was done. Many were already questioning whether the company's internal culture encouraged this kind of discrimination in the first place. Meanwhile, Karoline was invited onto multiple news programs to discuss the incident. She used the opportunity to speak about faith, personal freedom, and the importance of standing up for one's beliefs. "This isn't just about me," she said in one interview. "It's about every person who's been told to hide who they are. Faith isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of." As the days passed, the backlash against the flight attendants' actions only grew. While some defended her, arguing that she was simply trying to follow what she thought was policy, most agreed that she had seriously overstepped. The airline eventually announced that they had taken appropriate disciplinary action against the flight attendant, though they didn't specify what that meant. Some speculated that she had been fired, while others believed she had been reassigned or given mandatory training. For Karoline, though, the most important thing wasn't what happened to the flight attendant. It was the larger conversation that had been sparked. A few weeks later, she received an email from a woman she had never met. "Karoline, I just wanted to thank you. I work for a major company, and last year my boss told me I couldn't wear my cross necklace at work because it might offend others. I was too afraid to speak up, but after seeing what you did, I decided I wouldn't hide my faith anymore. Thank you for giving people like me the courage to stand up." Karoline smiled as she read the message. This was why she had spoken out. It was never about causing controversy. It was about reminding people that their faith, their values, and their beliefs matter. And no one had the right to take that away. As the weeks went by, Karoline's story continued to make waves. Major media outlets debated the issue, and countless social media discussions kept the conversation alive. Some critics tried to downplay the incident, saying it was an overreaction. But the overwhelming response from everyday people proved otherwise. This was about more than just one flight attendant or one passenger. It was about a growing trend of silencing faith in public spaces. Karoline received thousands of messages from supporters. Some were from fellow Christians, thanking her for standing up. Others came from people of different faiths who recognized the dangerous precedent being set. One particularly touching message came from a Muslim woman who wrote, "I wear a hijab, and I know what it's like to feel pressured to hide your faith to make others comfortable. What happened to you could happen to anyone. Thank you for standing firm." The story even caught the attention of lawmakers. A few congressmen and senators addressed the issue, using Karoline's experience as an example of why religious liberty needed stronger protections. Some even pushed for clearer policies that would prevent companies from pressuring employees or customers to hide their beliefs. Meanwhile, the airline found itself in damage control mode. Their initial statement hadn't been enough to calm the outrage. So they released another one, this time emphasizing their commitment to religious freedom and promising new training for employees. But the public wasn't convinced. Many pointed out that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. The airline's stock even took a slight dip as boycotts were organized by religious groups and supporters of Karoline's cause. As for the flight attendant, rumors swirled about her fate. Some reports suggested she had been fired, while others claimed she had been placed on administrative leave. Either way, she had learned a hard lesson. Targeting someone for their faith wasn't going to be tolerated. One evening, Karoline sat down with a conservative news host for an exclusive interview. So, Karoline, did you ever expect this moment to become as big as it has? The host asked. Karoline shook her head. Not at all. I was just standing up for something I believed in. But I think the reason this resonated with so many people is that they see what's happening. Faith is being pushed out of public life, and a lot of people are tired of it. The host nodded. What message do you have for people who might be afraid to stand up for their beliefs? Karoline smiled. Don't be afraid. The truth is, you're not alone. There are millions of people who share your values and your faith, and when you stand up, others will stand with you. The interview went viral, inspiring even more people to speak out about their own experiences. Churches, faith-based organizations, and even some celebrities voiced their support for Karoline. In the months that followed, Karoline became a symbol of courage in the fight for religious freedom. She was invited to speak at events, join panel discussions, and even advocate for new policies that would protect people of faith in workplaces, schools, and public spaces. Looking back, she realized that what had started as an uncomfortable moment on a plane had turned into something much bigger. It was never just about a flight attendant telling her to hide her cross. It was about a cultural shift, one that needed to be challenged. And thanks to her willingness to stand firm, thousands of others found the courage to do the same.